Well, how do you go from a portrait photographer, which is so interesting in of itself, I find, and then to saying, I'm going to do a podcast? How and why did that come about?
Well, my mom had Alzheimer's for 20 years.
Hi, everybody. I am Carmen DeValis, and I am the founder and president of Doggies for Dementia Foundation. That's a lot. Doggies for Dementia is a nonprofit 501c3 business. And what we do is we gift photography, photo sessions, and video to families impacted by dementia. And we usually include the family dog or familiar dog because dogs often add a little bit of, well, a lot of fun and give us a candid photos that we all love so much. And then what we do together is we share those stories. We honor that family and that loved one with dementia and do our best to raise awareness, to show the world the many faces and stories around Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, which is so important because that isolation, stigma, and just not understanding enough about it just leads to really rough times for families. And that's what we're about. And this is our Experts Dig In with Doggies for Dementia, our YouTube channel podcast. I guess it's a video podcast. And today I am delighted to have our guest, Jennifer Fink, who is founder of Fading Memories and a fellow photographer, which I love. There's so many things about you, Jennifer. I mean, you started something new after a second career, which I realize I have many guests who do that. So that, like me, I think I just am attracted to the story. And the whole idea of taking a difficult situation and what do you do about that? And what you found yourself doing and why. And I just can't wait to hear your story about how Fading Memories, your podcast, came about. So welcome to our program.
Thank you. So you forgot to mention I'm also owned by dogs. Let's put it that way.
Oh, okay, right. A fellow dog lover.
Yes.
yes. They've run our lives in so many ways.
No, that is true. Mine are grumpy with me because it's raining today, which in California is a rare event, unfortunately. And my husband is out of town, so they did not get a walk.
Oh gosh.
Like, sorry, guys.
Yeah. Well, how do you go from a portrait photographer, which is so interesting in of itself, I find, and then to saying, I'm going to do a podcast? How and why did that come about?
Well, my mom had Alzheimer's for 20 years, and my dad did the bulk of the caregiving until 2017. Despite the fact that he had his own health issues, he completely resisted and rejected help from my sister and I. So after he passed away in March 2017, obviously she and I became responsible for mom, and I'm the oldest of the two of us. So we all know how those things work out. And she still has kids at home, and mine had just moved out. So, all things happening for obvious reasons. I was the healthcare power of attorney, so more of her care landed on me. And I'm an avid reader. I love to read. I was reading books. I was doing deep internet research, trying to find ways to connect with her, to engage with her, and have visits that didn't leave me wanting to slam my head into the cement wall. My mom was very happy sitting around basically shooting the breeze, which would have been fine, except for the fact that she asked me the same question every 3 minutes. And that I had taken the advice of basically, I didn't answer the question 100% every time. So I went and visited her on Mondays. This was back in the old days when one actually went to a gym instead of having a Peloton in your house like I do now. So I would tell her, oh, well, I went to the gym and did, spin class or whatever it was on Monday. And then 3 minutes later, she'd ask me, so what have you been up to lately? And I'm like, oh, well, we had Rotary today when you had Rotary in person.
Yes.
Which we're getting back to now. But
yeah.
And then she'd ask me again, oh, well, we had Rotary and so spoke on yada, yada. Carmen talked about Doggies for Dementia. It was really fun. And then, so literally I would chop my day up into little bits. The last time she'd ask me the question, I'd give her the entire answer. I went to the gym, I went to
Oh,
Rotary, so-and-so talked, like, then I came to visit you and aren't we having fun? Oh yeah. What have you been up to lately? And that's when I wanted to slam my head into the wall because I'm like, I can't do this. I wasn't super excited to just sit around because that just, my
uh-huh.
before I learned better, my to-do list would be just like going through my brain, which she could pick up on. And then she'd get kind of tense. And then it all went downhill from there. So I was desperately trying to find anything other than just sitting around, shooting the breeze, answering the same question every 3 minutes for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And all of the advice that I came across, it never worked. And I didn't have a person to ask. Like, they tell you simplify their hobbies. Well, my mom was really creative and I'm creative. So I'm like, cool. I've got like these, like the poor man's alcohol ink art where you take Sharpies and you draw on like a plain glass tile and drop alcohol on it and see what it does. Maybe blow it around with a straw or your mouth or whatever. And you can't screw it up because
Yeah.
well, unless you're trying, I a few weeks ago attempted to do real alcohol ink flowers.
Yes.
And yeah, I basically made a hot mess, but because I do card crafting, I just chopped up the pieces in like hearts and flowers and the hot mess went away. So that's fine. It's like, you really can't.
See how creative you are, Jennifer. I'm learning alcohol inks too. I had a lot of fun with it, but yeah, you have to embrace the imperfection, right?
Exactly. And it's kind of just the joy of creating. And that's what I was trying to give her, was the joy of creating. And she would stress about doing it wrong. And what am I supposed to do? It was just like, back to the slamming the head into the wall. It was like, what the hell? This is like, like this woman did woodworking. She made all kinds of really cool things out of wood that I would probably chop off a finger. And she did that in the early stages of Alzheimer's. So imagine what she might have been able to do, if she hadn't had Alzheimer's. And, then they say, well, take, old family photo albums. Well, my sister had made a scrapbook of pictures of the two of us. Now, my sister and I are like, we cannot get any more opposite. And I mean, she's got dark brown hair, chocolate brown eyes, olive skin. She tans at the drop of a hat. I have to dash from shadow to shadow because I burn at the drop of a hat. It's like, we do not look alike at all. And so I figured, okay, this is cool. We're talking pictures from when we were kids. So I bring her this album. I'm like, oh, I thought it'd be fun to look through this scrapbook that and I used my sister's name, made. And I would have thought that the name would have rung a bell. It didn't. And that was kind of interesting. And I knew my mom thought I was her best friend, but I figured best friend could look at old family photos and still enjoy it. It didn't have to be me, the daughter, which trying to be two people sometimes was confusing for me.
Yeah.
Not for her. She didn't know who I was, but other than her best friend, which was fine. And like literally she had no idea who these children were. I'm like, we're talking like 45 years ago. Like, what decade are you in? I cannot figure this out. And so that was actually kind of painful that like she didn't even recognize her kids in really old photos. We're talking
because typically the older memories are what's preserved. It's the newer memories that get lost. And you said your mother had Alzheimer's for 20 years.
Yep.
Wow. Okay, that's longer than.
Yeah, that's longer than average. And I was always the youngest one in my support group. So I always said, like, I win. Like, I win. It's like my joke.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Yeah. No win there. Right. But did she have early onset? Was she young? How old was she when she was diagnosed?
Well, she was 69. But by the time that she finally allowed all of the diagnostic testing to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, my daughter was 16 and it was like, duh, we do not need a medical,
to tell you
diagnosis to tell us what we already know.
Yeah.
So she died at 77. So yeah,
So
I am
57
pretty
and
certain she
50.
started showing signs of memory issues at 52 and a half, which was really
Yeah.
scary when I got to that age. I have now passed that age and I'm pretty sure my brain is okay. But anyway,
Good.
I tried all of the tactics, all of the things people said to do. And I tried to roll with, the emotional gut punches, just and not let it affect me, but that was not easy. And
Yeah.
so one day again, the
Yeah.
old
I think well, I want to just pause right there. I
uh-huh.
think for anyone who hasn't ever been a caregiver, the impact of what you're describing emotionally day to day and watching the decline is really beyond words to describe.
Mhm.
It is just like impossible to describe the pain of that every day. And I just wanted to acknowledge that because we hear it. I hear caregivers and some feel really guilty and shameful about who they are as a person, that they're not coping well with the situation. And I'm just like, I don't know who would. It
Yeah,
takes time, right? And then you start to say, like you did, what, where can I find some information? Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah.
I had attended, let's see, this all blends together. So my father passed away in March of 2017, and I went to a hospice grief support group, which I have always felt like I am the round peg getting stuck in a square hole. It fits, but not really,
Yeah.
because I went to this support group again, yay, youngest. And it was like, it's like, yes, my dad died and it's sad and it's frustrating, but it's like, I have this whole other giant life thing that I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
And I was more of a support to the other people there, which was really frustrating, because it's like, I need to
Oh.
figure out how to like get over losing him, and visiting with my mom, who thinks I'm her best friend and always says, "Does my husband know where we're going?" Always in that
Oh.
snarky tone of voice. And I cannot tell you how many
Mm.
months it took me. I would say, "Yes, mom, dad knows where we're going," which did not answer her question, because she wasn't asking about dad. She was asking about her husband.
Her
So
husband.
that was a challenge. So I was driving to the
Yeah.
gym, and I have been an avid podcast listener since before there were podcast player apps. So
Mhm.
you had to listen to them through your internet browser. You
Yes.
didn't use Photoshop, so try streaming a podcast and running Photoshop and hope that your computer doesn't blow up on you.
Yeah, especially you're talking 2017. A lot has changed since
This was
2017.
like not 8, 9, 10, like right when podcasts were new.
Uh,
I was on a serious weight loss journey, and I was listening to podcasts on health and fitness and nutrition and all this stuff,
uh-huh.
because it's interesting and you learn things, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. So I was
Yeah.
driving to the
And it can
gym.
play while you edit in Photoshop. I
except that
totally get that.
yeah, except the computer would be like,
Uh,
toots,
Slow.
pick a function. These are both very big things you're wanting me to
It's like
do.
the circle of doom.
You're like, I'm pretty sure I asked you to, oh yes, the spinning wheel of death. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Let me close the podcast and stop listening. So
Yeah.
I had gotten back into podcast when the player apps came out, and I was listening to one driving to the gym, and it was like, duh, there's a podcast on like every freaking topic, like cheese making. Like, I don't even know how you
Yes.
do a podcast on that, but there are literally podcasts on everything. I'm going to go find, when I get home, I'm going to find a podcast for Alzheimer's caregivers. There was one. So this was
Mhm.
fall of 2017.
Mhm.
And I desperately tried to get into it. And it just didn't speak to me. It wasn't my cup of tea. And I thought, this is super frustrating, because this is the best way to learn this stuff. I can listen to it in the 15 minutes it takes to go to see mom, or the
Yeah.
12 minutes to go to the gym, or an hour on my phone while I'm editing photographs.
Right.
So, and
Right.
I tried, and I've tried since. But one of the podcasts I was listening to at the time was called Side Hustle School. It's still around. And they talked about the benefits of using a podcast to promote your business, which
Mhm.
I had learned way back in the pre-podcast player days. but they also did a bonus episode on how to start a podcast. I'm like, I can do that. And
So that was your light bulb moment,
yep.
right? That was your pivot point. Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
kept
I
thinking,
have
if
one
I
too.
can't get into this one option, if it doesn't speak to me, I can't be the only one. I mean, I know I'm the round peg in the square hole, but I can't be the only one.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I started my own, and I've been doing it for 4 years now. I cannot believe that.
That's amazing. And I can only imagine too what I'll just speak for myself and you can answer to this. I learned so much from my guests and so much about what's going on in the world. I mean, I've spoken to people in the UK and Scotland and Ireland, and what I said UK, but and London and in the United States. And it's so different from place to place, and yet there's a common theme. But I've just learned so much. So it helps me, helps our audience too, right? So yeah, I don't know. I'm going to ask you this kind of off the cuff, but have you had a favorite guest?
No, actually, I've had I've had some that have been on a couple times. There's one gal that I call her, I've got like these internet friends. It's very strange.
Yeah.
Like people that I consider friends that I've never met face to face.
Mm-hmm.
And she's in Southern California, and she's just so personable and so bubbly, and just, she is so much fun. Like you cannot come away after listening to an episode with her. She did one, the title I can remember is 365 Caregiving Tips. And I mean, it's like you could be having a horrible day with your loved one or just whatever. And she's just so much fun that you come away feeling positive and happy, and like maybe not wanting to slam your head into the wall.
Yeah. Yeah. And you hit a really interesting point, Jennifer, in that every day there might be a different need. And like one day you might need that cheerful, like, oh, I just need a reason to smile today. This is really hard. Or another day where you're feeling empowered and like, okay, I'm ready to learn something new today. And podcasts are wonderful for that because you can pick and choose and start to listen and go, okay, that's not so great for me today, or it's too much, or it's I need something with more substance or what have you. And there are just so many wonderful experts for me, including family members who have walked the walk, and what they have to share with us is priceless,
And everybody's story is similar but different.
Mm-hmm.
And what I find fascinating is I did not, like, my maternal grandmother had vascular dementia, which did start in her mid 70s, and she lived to be 91. So I
So
pretty
almost
much
20
assumed,
years for your grandmother with
yeah, I
dementia
think it
as
was
well.
about 15.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like a family is stubborn, in case anybody didn't know. I mean, my paternal grandmother lived to be 103, but her mind was fine. She had other issues like glaucoma and hard of hearing at the end of her life, but her brain was good.
Yeah.
So I assumed with my mom that we had a long haul. Like we'd already had a long haul. I figured we had, she moved in at 74. I figured we easily had 10 years. And one of my biggest freaks was
memory care, moved in memory care.
Yes.
74. Mm-hmm.
Is that we'd run out of money, because that happened a lot. You'd grow attached to a family member or another resident, and then they'd move out, like at the peak of needing the most amount of care, they'd run out of money. And it's like,
and I think that's an issue. I've had a few guests talk about that from the caregiver point of view, that the general public doesn't understand. The thought is Medicare pays for everything. The financial impact of dementia. And it's true when the money runs, because it's self-pay for memory care. And when the money runs out from whatever assets, then it's time to look for either a family member who can pretty much change whatever they're doing in their lives to become a full-time caregiver, which is very difficult, or look for whatever state or, in the care is not what they've had before.
No, we were very blessed. The company that ran the community my mom was in, I was on another podcast recently February and March with experiences in caregiving, they asked me, hey, would you come on and talk about choosing a care home? And I responded via email, like, sure, I'll be the poster child for how not to do it. Because
Oh,
there was a memory care residence literally down the hill from my house, and I knew it wasn't great. And I had clients and neighbors, and I had enough like knowledge of their business practices, and it's not the easiest business in the world.
no.
And it, you know, my husband went there before my dad died, and he came home looking like he'd seen a ghost. He's like, oh my God, I'd never put your parents there. And so, you know, that one
Yeah.
was off the table. So I had to find a place that was close, nice. And so I went and looked at the one that she was in, and it was, you know, it was nice. You know, the staff was friendly. Obviously the salesperson was friendly, but that's a
Yeah.
given. The executive director, he and I ended up with a really nice relationship. I watched him deal with stuff, and I thought, this is not cool. And so we toured the place. Of course, the assisted living part was beautiful, lots of things going on, lots of opportunities for activities and socialization. The memory care was very pretty. It wasn't quite as nice, but that was more for their safety. The dining rooms were the biggest difference. My sister was like, well, why don't they have like flowers and pretty stuff on their tables? I'm like, because it would walk away, you know, and you're
Yeah.
not going to leave, you know, silverware on the table for them to like jab somebody with it. I'm like, you know, I said, unfortunately, you know,
Yeah.
you can't just leave all the pretty stuff out. 'Cause it's going to walk away.
Mm,
But when they said that my mom could keep her dog, I could not give them a deposit fast enough. I
mhm.
did no Google search. I did no like state checking for any of that stuff that I still don't
Yeah.
really know. I'd have to go back and listen to the podcast I was on. Like, I went on gut instinct, and thank God it was good, because
Mhm.
the staff was great with her. They did have turnover, but they had a core group of people that, you know, I always considered myself to be the captain of mom's care team. I
Mhm.
learned really quickly that that is how you had to play the game, which isn't really quite the right terminology. I watched residents' families be very demanding and just lacking understanding. You know, it was really frustrating because like their toiletries would always be locked up. So you had to, if you needed extra toilet paper or whatever, and stuff always seemed to walk away, even with my mom, you had to go find a busy employee to unlock the cabinet. I even asked them once, I'm like, can I have a key
Oh,
to this? Because this is really annoying. Like, I
yeah.
will handle this stuff myself. I just need a freaking key. And
Right.
I forgot what their reasoning for not giving me a key was, but it was like, I understood the need for it. And yes, it was annoying. And yes, they should have given me a key, but it was like, I'm just going to deal, you know, like they didn't give me a key because they would then have to make sure I locked stuff up. And it just, you know, I was very understanding of the burden that they were undertaking. It's like
Mhm.
they had to deal with my mom all the time. I only had to deal with my mom when I was there.
Mhm.
So I learned real quick watching what other people were doing, what not to do. And so they, you know, all the way to the end, they put up with some of her, she started scratching and clawing people when she got upset.
Oh.
And it was
Yeah,
like,
the relationship caregiver to caregiver, professional caregiver, family caregiver. Oh my gosh, that's fraught with emotion, right? And many family caregivers have been the main caregiver for a long time before they like can hand over some of that responsibility. And that's a real learning curve on how best to manage and expectations. And I think the expectations, wow, um,
it's not going to be
is
as good as what you may or may not have been able to do on your own in your home or
mhm,
theirs. And, you know, it's like, are they safe? Are they
mhm,
clean? Are they, you know, as reasonably happy as possible? Are they fed? Those are the
mhm.
important things. Everything else is extra. Like my mom and I were
Yeah.
going out one afternoon, and getting my mom to get rid of clothes was a nightmare. That was a challenge for a long time during the Alzheimer's.
Yes.
And she had a blouse on that was too big, and the shoulders slipped off of her body. And I look over and I'm like, I wonder whose black sports bra that is. Because my mom never had sports bras. She didn't have black. And I was like, and I could have freaked out. I could have gotten upset with the staff. Why are you putting somebody else's clothes in her room? And, I mean, I could have made it a whole trauma.
Yeah.
And instead it was like, oh, well,
Yeah. Yeah. Choose your battles wisely, right?
It's like she's dressed, and it's like it's not easy for her to get dressed and they have to help, but she doesn't want help. I mean, like she got dressed, she changed clothes. Let's just go with that and let's go get our nails done and not worry about somebody else's bra.
Oh my gosh. Well, I just love chatting with you so much. And I know you've got a wealth of information for our listeners, as well as, everyone out there who's tuned in. So congratulations on a successful podcast, first of all, and what relevant topics, caregiving, brain health, aging well. Thank you. I need to listen to that because I'm like 63 this year. I'm like, I'm doing my best. I don't know if I said self-care and brain health and so, wonderful topics that are really good for all of us, but particular for caregivers. And I know there's a lot of information out there, and we've been talking about, how best to find that, and podcasts are a wonderful resource. So we will have information if you're listening on the blog, it'll be on the blog. And if you're on YouTube, it'll be in the comments as well and description, because we definitely want to know where to find you, Jennifer, and how to listen in. And my goodness, do you, if you had one bit of important advice for a family caregiver who's a new caregiver, whether their loved one's in their home or elsewhere, what would that be? What do you think?
To put a care team in place early. Like if you get a diagnosis today, start the care team tomorrow. And that doesn't necessarily mean hiring people to come in and deal with your loved one or help them shower or, because that's kind of intrusive. It's intrusive to you. It's all of a sudden now this person's coming in and trying to like manhandle you into clothes. You're like, no. And a lot of people living with Alzheimer's or dementia, they don't want some stranger in there helping them shower. Like, why would anybody want that?
Scary. Well, showers are scary anyway. Showers are notoriously the enemy. Yeah, it's scary. Water being, yeah.
And I actually have a past guest who's living with FTD, so frontal temporal dementia. Yes. And I had heard, read, etc., that in older people and people living with some sort of cognitive impairment, the water hitting their skin is actually painful, like needly. And I thought that doesn't sound very nice.
No, and it's horrifying, and to force things. Okay, so what would make up a care team?
Well,
some that might.
Well, this is how I suggest people go about it. Make a list of all of the tasks all of the responsibilities you have to do today. And then do that for the week. And then you do that for the month. Now you've got a list of things that need to be done. Now, secondly, make a list of everybody that that, family, friends, church members, whatever, community people that you think would be willing to help you when you need help. And then write down what you think their best skill is. Like, I cannot call insurance companies or banks. Like, I can do it, but literally like 45 seconds on hold or talking to them. It's like, I don't know what buttons they push. I just cannot do it. So my husband was in banking for 20 years. He's been a real estate agent for almost 20 years, almost 20 years. It'll be 20 years next summer. It's like making us sound old. He started working when he was 12, right?
Yeah.
So, he was a real estate agent during the, real estate crisis when everything was short sales and, foreclosures. And, like we're in California, and he'd wake up and some bank would be like, we need an answer to this in 2 hours. And it's like, you sent it to me at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, get real. They did not care. And he'd be on hold for hours. I'm like,
So he's a
It
patient
stresses me out
guy.
just thinking about
Yeah.
it.
Okay. So Jennifer, I am with you. My husband too, very patient on the phone, long holds, the loop-de-loo. I'm like, I don't know how you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So finding the right team player with the right gifts. Yeah.
Well, that way, and so then
Yeah.
when your neighbor or, hopefully a family member or both
Uh-huh.
says, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry to hear about, Jennifer's Alzheimer's. Is there something I can do to help?" You have an answer.
You have a
You don't
list.
you don't
Yes.
hopefully
Yeah.
you've committed it to memory.
Yeah.
But you have it, at least you have an answer where it's like, I'm not going to ask Carmen to like, "Could you please help me set up online banking and be on hold with the," you'd be like, "Nope, I will manhandle your person
Yeah.
into the shower before I do
Yeah.
that."
And then you know what? I might not ask you again, what do you need? Because I'm fearing you're going to ask me to do something that is just beyond my bandwidth. And we don't. So that I love your suggestion, because that sets up for success, in that you're asking people for what you know they can do and wouldn't mind doing for the most part, right? And may ask at future times. And you can even set that up too. Say, I'm going to be asking you again. So set up expectations, right? Because I know a lot of caregivers the people will ask, what can I do? And they're like a deer in the headlights, because they're just like, it's chaotic up here. Like, I don't even know what to ask for. I don't even know what to ask for right now, what to
Well,
hand
a lot
over.
of people are very hesitant to offer help because they don't want to get sucked in.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't, like I want to help my neighbor, but on my terms, which,
Yes.
that might sound selfish, and maybe to a degree it is a little bit, but it's like, I've already been down this path. I
Yeah.
dealt with my grandmother, I dealt with my mom. I'm very happy about being one step removed and helping people that are taking and doing the caregiving now. This is
Uh-huh.
all, I'm very happy with this,
Mhm.
and I do facilitate a support group. So I'm still in the thick of it, but my dad died literally a month after my daughter moved out. And my husband and I were like, "Yay, we're empty nesters and we can travel and we can do this and we can do that."
Uh-huh.
Oh, wait, now we have to deal with my mom. So I totally
Oh,
get I don't want to get sucked in. But, if somebody said, "Hey," when I've actually had this experience, a friend of my husband's, they've got a really unfortunate family situation going on, younger onset, probably Alzheimer's. And it's clear to me, and I should say allegedly because there's been no proof, but it looks like a, a sibling and their boyfriend or girlfriend, I forget which direction it goes. I can't keep track of other people's families.
yeah.
Have basically taken financial advantage of this woman. And she
Oh.
has properties in California. So yes, here, put it, insert cha-ching sound effect here.
Mhm.
And they've like sucked all the equity out. And this woman's going to need care, and she's single. She doesn't have children.
Oh.
It's ugly. And so I've talked to him. I've given him all the resources that I'm aware of, and I'm there to like verbally hold his hand, because I'm thinking, yikes, this is way ugly. And I've told him, I'm like, this is really ugly. And I'm really sorry that you guys have to deal with this. I'm like, I guess technically you don't, but it's going to land on your doorstep no matter what you do. So at least you're
Mhm.
trying to deal with it. And, I'm there emotionally for them, but yeah, I'm not going to go like help take care of the sister.
Yeah. Healthy boundaries are important for all of us, and to verbalize that too. And so that I think that just avoids that disappointment in ourselves, or for other people expecting something that we're not able to. Yeah. Well, I so have enjoyed chatting with you.
Okay.
Okay, where can we find Fading Memories podcast?
Well, I am on every podcast player app known to man. I did not know there were so many podcast playing apps until I started hosting a podcast. They seem to pop up all over the place. You can find me on social media under Fading Memories or my name. I'm on Instagram. That's my preferred platform, as Alzheimer's podcast. So that's really easy to remember.
Mhm.
The web,
That's where I saw it. We
yeah.
met. Yeah.
um, you know, um, if you go to my YouTube channel, my social media links are there. So
Good. And we'll be
I
linking to that too.
Thank
Is
you.
it under your YouTube? Is it under Fading Memories?
Yeah, I
Refresh
think
my
it's
memory.
Fading Memories podcast. Quick funny story. I went to the way Fading Memories came about is I told a funny story that happened with my mom and her dog and another resident who, if she could put eyes on it, it was hers. So that happened with mom's dog one day.
Mm.
And I was retelling this story on Facebook, and a past photography client who is a business coach said, "Oh, you should write a book." And I wanted to call it as the memories fade, which for people who are old enough, you probably can find the reference to soap operas that I've never watched.
Yes,
And
my mother did though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's way too much text for a tiny little 1 by 1 inch square artwork on a podcast app. So it became Fading Memories. I went to buy the domain name. This was right before lunch. I typed it into the, place where one goes to buy a domain. And I'm like, I must need some food because
Oh,
I don't think that number is correct. So I went and had lunch, and I
mhm.
came back and I said, no, that still says about $35,000. Yeah, that
Oh,
won't be happening. So apparently
yeah.
Fading Memories is a movie, a book, a band, Lord all knows what else.
Oh,
So my photography studio had a very long domain name. So my website is fadingmemoriespodcast.com.
that works. That works wonderfully.
Yeah, I didn't have to pay $35,000 for that one.
I'm so glad you did it. Yeah, those are lessons to learn. And
Yeah,
sometimes if you
I
do
was
well-
like, really?
yeah.
I would never ever have thought that it was all these other things, and it's
Yeah.
wild. So yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you did. And thank you for being our guest today. And thank you all for listening to Experts Dig In with Doggies for Dementia. And we'll catch up next week. Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Thank you.